uncertainty. But that's not to say that solves the question of absolute truths, okay? Because this discussion has clearly shown that that's really not what we're concerned with. We're not concerned with facts about life. We're really concerned with how we should act, how we should behave. As someone might say, what the righteous way to behave is, okay? And that's at a different level, okay? What happens to us after we die, right, is on the same level, as is Brazil located next to Terre Haute, okay? Except I can walk to Brazil and find that out. Unfortunately, right now, I would prefer, not to walk to answer that other question, okay? But that's something different, okay? What we're really concerned with is the here and now. At least that's what I'm concerned with. I'm concerned with how I should act, how I should live my life, okay? Because those are questions I feel I can answer and have a pretty good answer to, even on a relativist basis.
Dr. Cornwell, you mentioned before that there is a way to recognize something as an absolute truth. What would you say that is? Like, how can you say that, this is a truth, this is absolute, this is what sets it apart?
You're asking the questions in the wrong order, because now I'm jumping around in my notes, and it's very confusing to me. So, how can you recognize something as absolute truth? And I think I addressed some of that in the first question. And I appreciate what Heinz had to say as far as he said, there is absolute truth, just we can't know what it is. I think that's what I interpret what you said. We can't have confidence that we know what it is.
Well, factually in terms of factual matters, okay, there's absolute truth. In terms of normative matters, my job is to defend the relativism.
Okay, so again, maybe this is the engineer in me, and I don't know what the theory of criteria for truth that I'm using here. There's lots of them, but coherence and consensus theory and consistency theory and correspondence theory. So I'm not sure which of those I'm actually an advocate of. But to me, to determine if something's absolutely true, and to me, like I said, there's very few things that I would put in the absolute truth category, and one of those would be God and the existence of God. And I think that's one of the ones that you have to get right. There is a God or there's not a God, and that has serious implications in regard to one's life. So I believe one should look at the supporting evidence that needs to be evaluated. I think we can evaluate it with our minds, and we can have confidence that something is true. And again, because I believe in God, and I think there are evidence to support God, but eventually it does come down to a matter of faith, and I will be the first to admit that. But I believe God has given us the ability to know things, and has made a world that is knowable. So it's not, we don't have to go through life with some great uncertainty of saying, I'm just not sure I can know what the truth is. I also believe that God is a personal God, and there is such a thing as revelation, that God has revealed parts of his will and his character to us. And again, as truth himself, I think he can reveal absolute truth. And again, to me, an important part of knowing truth is evaluating the claims of who Jesus was. Because if he was the Son of God, if he was raised from the dead, then I think he can reveal truth. He is truth.
Dr. Luegenbiehl, if you'd like to close up with any final thoughts, if you'd like to present what it is that you personally believe, this would be the time to do so as well.
Sure. I would be happy to give you some concluding thoughts. But first I thought I'd spend 2 hours explaining to you the distinction between coherence theory and correspondence theory. Just kidding. Okay. I'm glad we're given this opportunity to finish this off in terms of what we believe. Okay. And as I kind of foretold at the beginning of the discussion, I'm not actually a moral relativist. I am a moral absolutist, but I base my position not on God, but on the human capacity to reason. Okay, and kind of try to give you a little demonstration of that tonight, that we can reason out what's right and wrong, for example, based on the results of our actions. Okay, I also believe that human beings over many millennia have developed the capacity to figure these things out. Okay, for themselves. We're not at the end goal of that process, but then humanity in general is not at the end goal of anything so far. There's still plenty to learn for each of us individually, and for us as human beings collectively. So I'm going to hang my hat on reason, and I'm going to say, in that case, it doesn't really matter much about God in terms of this discussion, okay? Because as the great theologian St. Thomas Aquinas said, there are two ways to find out the will of God. There's the way of faith, and there is the way of reason. And God wouldn't have given us the capacity to reason if he didn't believe reason couldn't give us access to the truth. So that's kind of my own position on this.
Same question?
Yeah, same question.
So final words, comments, wrap it up. Again, I guess I would say there are really very few, limited number of things that I would put in the category of absolute truth, and they're all related to God and who he is. Other than that, I think there is a lot, when I think of relativism, I think of postmodernism, and I think there's a lot of truths that can teach us, that many of the things that we take for truth may very well be relative, may be cultural, but something that we can have a firm foundation on is the existence of God. And based on his character, we can come up with an ethical framework, in my opinion. So again, I think there is a distinction between believing there's absolute truth and knowing exactly what that absolute truth is. And I think, like Heinz said at the very beginning, we need to approach this with humility and say, there's a chance I'm wrong. And I think that's true. But I do think we, again, using reason, I think we can examine the evidence. And to me, the evidence that supports who Jesus Christ was is very strong. And so, for me, I think if we're just complex biochemical machines with nothing different than a rock except that we're just more complex, then I don't think there's any reason for us to believe we have any significance in this world, for us to believe that we even have reason. In other words, in that we have the ability that this biochemical machine, what impulses it's feeding me, has any correlation to reality at all. I don't think there's a rational basis for that. Now, does that affect people's lives? Generally, probably not. People live their lives happily without ever thinking about philosophy. But I do think there is a place for this sort of discussion. For me, the major epiphany was in high school when someone asked me if I believed in God. And I always said I believed in God, sort of. I mean, how can you know there's a God? It was very wishy-washy. And it wasn't until I actually started thinking, if there is a God, and he did create the world, that ought to affect my life somehow. And so that's, I guess, the takeaway message I would leave for you is ask that question to yourself and really explore it and approach it with reason and see if you can examine the reliability of the New Testament scriptures and see if Jesus was who he said he was, because he said he was the truth. And we've been talking about knowing truth and absolute truth, and I think truth isn't really found other than in him and in God. So that's my final statement.